Hi, welcome back to the NWOET vlog. This week, Judy and I are going to be talking about social emotional learning and going back to school. There's been a lot of things that I have seen pop up all over the place about social emotional in the last couple days and emails and on social media. And Judy has some great stories that she's going to tell you about that. But basically, I think there's a need for it. There's a need for it all the time, but I think we've realized that a little bit more recently that we all need support, whether it be personally, professionally, at school, at home. We need to understand that. And the first time that I kind of stumbled upon social emotional was way before the state, the ODE, the Ohio Department of Education, implemented a social emotional model, was in my PhD program. I thought I was going to find all these instructional things that were important. And I guess social emotional is instructional, but I thought it was going to be curriculum related, like the way the teacher taught the class. But basically my findings ended up that students are more engaged or enjoy class more when they're connected in some way. And social emotional is all about connections. It's all about making connections, understanding yourself, understanding other people, being, having empathy for other people. And I think all of that is important. Now, the one thing that I'm going to talk about, and Judy and I'll kind of go back and forth, is emotional health for all. A lot of times we don't think that it includes us. We don't think about that self-care, and that's important. I think right now, going back to school, and you can tell me how you feel about this, Judy, is that I think it's important for us to acknowledge that teachers need that self-care too. We need to acknowledge that the teachers went through a struggle and a challenge as well.
Yeah, in fact, there's a website called Edutopia, and they have a Facebook page, and there was actually an article. I haven't read the whole thing. I just saw the title and the description about teaching with depression. And if I had to pick one educational support website, it would be Edutopia. I mean, they have a website, it's edutopia.org, but I've mostly accessed it through Facebook. I followed it. And so at least once a day, I get one of their feature articles, and they just are really, really hit on the spot, the social emotional. Lately, there have been more than normal articles about social and emotional connections for teachers, educators, and for the students.
And I think actually when you take care of the teachers, that in turn is going to help the teachers take better care of the students. I think when we all come in and we're stressed out or depressed and going through whatever we're going through, anxiety, I mean, we have to recognize those things are going on. And when we take care of the teacher, then I think the teachers are going to be healthier and emotionally healthier to take care of the students as well and make those connections and have a good year for everybody. So Edutopia, she said that about that link. We'll put that link on our resource page at the bit.ly that you see on your screen periodically through this video recording. So the one thing that I think school districts can do specifically for teachers, and Judy, I think you're going to focus a little bit more on the student aspect, which is awesome, kind of a balance here, is that we need to listen intentionally. And of course, all these things we could use with students and teachers. But when teachers come in and talk, sometimes the attitude is, oh, they're just complaining. Oh, they're just, having a bad day, or that's just that teacher's personality. I don't want to say that's the negative cloud that floats over everything, but you do hear some negative talk when it comes to staff, teachers, whatever. I think we have to listen intentionally to the teachers, hear what they're saying, because that will, when teachers or people in general are heard or feel like they're heard, they're all in. They're connected to you, just like my research showed. They're more engaged when they feel like they're being heard. You could have monthly meetings, virtual meetings, face-to-face meetings, to have your teachers talk about what's going on, what they're doing in their classroom, how they're taking care of themselves. You know, a lot times during the day that they can do self-care, not just lesson planning, but that they can take a minute to breathe, go for a walk, definitely have lunch. Sometimes there's teachers that'll push all the way through and not self-care on themselves. And in turn, that hurts the teaching. And, you know, you can do a Google form, present at staff meetings, but, you know, acknowledge the fact that teaching is hard normally. And then we've been through a couple years that have been difficult here instructionally and emotionally. You know, just acknowledging that and bringing it to the forefront and saying, we're listening, and give people a chance to speak up and take care of themselves a little bit more.
Well, Tanya, as you're saying that, I'm thinking that this activity that was, I'm not able to give credit to the person, maybe it'll come up tonight on my Facebook, but it's an activity that really would work with staff or with students. But this teacher, the first week of school, gave each student a piece of paper. So they all had the same paper, and they were to write down, what are you most worried about? And it didn't have to be about school. It could be about home life. It could be about anything. Or, you know, what's your concerns? They may not have used the word concerns. It was elementary. And so if you happen to see that on Facebook, it had a picture of a bag, a grocery bag like this, with all the students, what they had written. So this could be teachers, the principal or superintendent could give each staff member a piece of paper, and then they had to, once they wrote this, gave them a selected amount of time, crumble it up into a wad, and then you throw it into a big pile. And the teacher spent time calling on students to go pick one up and to read it aloud. And there were no names on any of these. You were not to put your name, and the students would talk about it. And if they wanted to share that, yes, that's my concern or my worry, that was up to the student. They did not have to, some revealed who wrote it, others did not. But the teacher said there was a lot of hugging, there was a lot of crying, and you know, that could really be something the teachers coming back for an in-staff meeting or the first meeting. You know, what have you been concerned about so far this school year? But for one thing, the administration could read those later and find out what the concerns are of the teacher. Maybe that they don't want to reveal who it is, but I want somebody to hear me. And that was the main thing that came out of it, the emotional and social. They got their concerns heard by somebody. Because I think a lot of times teachers think that, oh, the principal's too busy to listen to me, or I don't know if I really want to share it with, you know, with anybody. But if they're anonymous, there it is out there. And so that was a really cool activity. And if I find who it was that put it out there, I will give them credit, but I spent a little bit too much time this morning trying to look for it. It was just within the last 24 hours I saw this activity, and there are a lot more out there if you need ideas. Yeah.
I love that because you just covered like two of them. And I don't like to speak about social emotional in a curriculum way, like teaching people self-awareness and relationship decision making. You know, I don't like to talk about it in that way because I like it when it naturally occurs. And both of those are like self-awareness. We're aware of ourselves and how we feel, and we're recognizing that. We learn more about ourselves. And then the social awareness, when you read someone else's pain, develop empathy for them, you understand socially that there's other people around you that are feeling the same way, and you just don't feel alone anymore. And recently I can't specifically remember what it was, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that another person sees that or feels that same way as I do. And it just helps. And it's like a relief. You're like, I'm not crazy. I'm not nuts. I feel this way too. And someone else feels it. Oh my gosh, you know, that validation, that acknowledgement of that. And the other thing is, I don't know if you're a Bachelorette watcher. Recently on the Bachelorette, the final couple, spoiler alert, if any of you haven't seen it yet, basically they are trying to become closer and more connected, hence, my research. And so what they do is they write their fears down, like you said, they write them down on a piece of paper in a journal, and then they read them to each other. That's a little bit different. And then they put them inside of this box, and I can't remember the thing that they burned, but it was this huge, like, it was creepy looking. It looked like a clown crossed with a skeleton crossed with, it was huge. It was probably 20 feet high, and they put their fears inside of it, and then they set it on fire. And it was supposed to represent that they were getting rid of their fears or eliminating their fears, which can be cathartic in many ways, but that's what made me think of it. But I think that's a great activity, your little bag of, putting your fears in it, and then getting the social awareness by someone grabbing it from the bag and being like, oh my gosh, someone else is reading it and acknowledging and validating exactly how I feel.
Yeah, and this activity was to hang this bag by the door, and that students would leave their worries in the bag. That was kind of the last thing. And speaking of bag of worries, I'm glad you used the word bag, because if I want to, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see if it can. Okay, that's the Edutopia. But there is a book called The Huge Bag of Worries. I'm tempted to buy this book. It's only $11.99 in paperback from Amazon, but this could take on a whole way of starting about before you went into that activity. And there's also a Pinterest site from a gal named Anna McCulloch. And again, we'll put this link up to her Pinterest site, about 120 ideas for this social emotional way of having students share their worries with their classmates. I don't know if she's a teacher. It didn't really say. I've got to investigate it more. But I just think there's a lot of help out there for if you don't have experience and you want to get other people's ideas that do work to do. There's actually even several YouTube videos based on this book, Huge Bag of Worries by Virginia Ironside. So, and Edutopia, well, let me go back. I should have just stayed there. But going back to Edutopia, we have they have had an unusual amount of articles about, this one is on the sense of belonging. Whoops, I don't need that. And then there's another one, who are your students? Here's an array of class exercises to get to know your students better throughout the school year. And I think that activity that I shared, the idea from someone else, is to getting to know your students. And if you're in the first week of class, you probably really don't know your students. And this would be a way to really get to know them better. And of course, it's said in the title here, increase their engagement. So,
yeah, I think that's really important to getting to know. I think that's the main point that I always focus on. And we are a technology agency, so a lot of my social emotional, I do talk about the social emotional and the things that you can do, but I talk about how you can do them with technology. But it is super important to make those connections and to help students understand their emotions and kind of move through those emotions. Now, with the last couple minutes that we have, I know that you had some stories, a story that you wanted to tell, or a couple stories that you wanted to tell. Did you want to share something about the importance of how important it is that students are social and not get that taken away? Now, the one thing that I've been researching is control theory or choice theory, and it talks about control. I think sometimes teachers want to have control over their situation, and so sometimes that control takes away from the social aspect of students. And I think you had a really good story about your son. in regards to that, where the teacher wanted control over the situation. And in turn, they were taking away the social aspect of that.
Yeah. Our son is very meticulous, and when he would do his work at school, he would take a lot longer than all the other students. Even though he was a very good student, he would be kept in from recess to finish his work. And my husband, being a fellow teacher in the same building, saw, where is Trent? And so he had a heart-to-heart talk with the teacher and said, look, I don't think it's a good idea, just because he's doing things slower, to have him miss recess. He needs recess. My husband was a phys ed teacher, elementary phys ed teacher. And so he really knew, how much the kids enjoyed recess and elementary phys ed and so forth, and that they needed that social time with each other. And so that really, and the teacher listened and understood and just didn't think of it that way. And so he didn't have to miss any more recess because he didn't get his papers done. So.
And I like that you say we have to see that teacher saw that different perspective. I think a lot of times we're not being mean for any reason. We just don't see that perspective. So sometimes a good conversation, which a lot of this involves conversations, a calm conversation, non-judgmental, non-critical, sometimes will help everybody understand which way we need to move. And I think that's why we need to open up the floor to discussions about what's going on. What do you fear? What are your worries? What are you scared of? What is the thing that most stresses you out in this year? And then continue those conversations to go on and then figure out how to take care of that self-care and how to assist each other with that care. So, well, Judy, I think this has been a great conversation. I wish we could go on and on because social emotional is super important. Basically, that's the time that we have. We're glad that you joined us. We'll have all these resources on the bit.ly, the website, the resource link that you see on your video right now, and our contact information at the end of this video, so you can send us some emails if you have any questions in regards to our topics. All right, well, that's all we have today. Thanks, Judy, for joining me. Hopefully you guys will join us again next week. We're going to start a 4-part series in regards to concerns and issues when integrating technology. We're going to break down the integration of technology and how you should approach that in your classroom associated with time, device usage, instructional patterns, structure, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that you were able to join us today for our social emotional portion. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot and take care.